This is your World Geography lesson for September 22nd. We're going to be covering pages 38 through 46 in this lecture. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Middle East. This is an incredibly important part of the world because of the fact that it is really where civilization began, and you'll be learning a little bit more about that later when we talk about the Fertile Crescent. But because of that, it has played a predominant role in history and continues to play a predominant role in history. It's also important because the Middle East is the birthplace of the three largest religions in the world: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. It's also important because of politics. It concerns every nation on the earth, what happens in the Middle East. This has to do, of course, with biblical prophecy. And we also are going to note that the Middle East economy is something that's important insofar as that it's the area that controls most of the world's oil. So all other economies that depend upon the Middle East for oil are dependent upon the Middle East. So it influences the countries in that way. Okay, so the Middle East is also called the crossroads of the ancient world, and this has to do with the fact that the Middle East was a very central location over land, and people would go back and forth through it through following trade paths and things of that nature. It's also God's chosen location for His chosen nation, and it was in this part of the world that Christianity was spread strategically. And God did that on purpose. He chose that area of the world on purpose to make sure that Christianity reached as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, and in His perfect timing. It's important to recognize that Africa is grouped with Asia, specifically the Middle East, but in our studies, we're going to consider that in a completely separate chapter. Africa is going to be its own thing. And I think I accidentally said Asia there just a few minutes ago. What I mean is Africa is grouped with the Middle East geographically. Asia and Africa are obviously two different continents. I just wanted to clarify. Okay, so in the Middle East, we have 18 countries, and we're going to be looking at them in this chapter. Obviously, not all of them in great detail, but we will be looking at them. There are 340 million people there, which is about 9/10 of the U.S., and if you want to, you can look on page 41 for an overview of the different nations in the Middle East. There are quite a few of them, and you can get an idea of what languages they speak, what their flags look like, things like that. The boundaries in the Middle East are mostly natural, so we have mountains and seas and things of that nature. And if you look at the total square miles, it's 2.5 million, which is a pretty big tract of land, but it's about 2/3 the size of the United States. Here is a map of the world, and the parts that are highlighted, of course, are the Middle East. I'm sure you recognize the Arabian Peninsula there. It is the largest peninsula in the world. So the Middle East is divided into 4 geographic areas. There's the Fertile Crescent, the Arabian Peninsula, the Northern Plateaus, and Transcaucasia. And we'll be looking at those different geographical areas throughout this chapter. And we're going to start with the Fertile Crescent. So the Fertile Crescent lies at the heart of the Middle East, and it is a narrow strip of land that is named for its fruitfulness and its crescent shape. It includes the countries of Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. And it's also quite possibly the Garden of Eden's location. And we also think that this is where the Tower of Babel was, and the Tower of Babel is important to remember because that is when the dispersion happened, which was the scattering of mankind across the globe, which was the beginning of nations. And remember that the dispersion happened because God confounded the languages, and the people who spoke similar languages or the same language grouped together, and they went off and they started their own tribes and eventually became nations. So what I want you to do is to pause here for a moment and complete the EdPuzzle about the Fertile Crescent, because you'll be learning a little bit more about the civilizations that arose in the Fertile Crescent. Well, I hope that you enjoyed your EdPuzzle. Here's another picture of the Fertile Crescent in map form. You can see it definitely does have a fertile crescent shape. This is land that was very fruitful and good for farming. And you know why? Because you watched the video. So in the Middle East, most of the climate is dry desert climate, which basically means it's warm all year and there's very little rainfall. So if you like rain, you probably wouldn't want to live in the Middle East. One of the most important and famous nations in the Middle East, of course, is Israel. It's also known as Canaan and Palestine, and it's the land that God promised Abraham and to Abraham's heirs. It's the Holy Land. This is where the Hebrews settled after the Exodus. This is also where David and Solomon ruled, two of the greatest monarchs in history. And of course, this is where Jesus lived his earthly life. And there is a lot that happened in Israel in its history. And so it might surprise you to find that Israel is only about the size of New Jersey, which goes to show you that God can use any person or any place, no matter how small. And there you can see Israel is very small indeed on this map. It's teeny tiny, just a tiny strip of land, but very important to the world and the future of the world. So the modern state of Israel was created in 1948 by the leading nations of the West, and this was because of the Holocaust. They wanted there to be a place for the Jews to go because of the fact that the Holocaust really opened up the eyes of the world leaders to the need of the Jews had of not having a country of their own. So 70% of Israel's people are Jews and the rest are Arabs, and both are descendants of Abraham. And because of this common forefather, we have a root of conflict, which is a religious conflict. The Jews believe that Jerusalem is a holy city, the city of David, versus the Muslims who believe that Muhammad ascended to heaven there. So they both hold Jerusalem as a religious site. In Jerusalem, we have the Dome of the Rock, which is an Islamic temple, a mosque, and it stands on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which there is a lot of speculation as to what that could mean, that they both share the same spot. But Jews, for the most part, control most of the city. There is a lot of conflict in the Middle East, particularly in Israel, and this conflict has to do with the West Bank. And this West Bank is land that has access to water, and because of the fact that it has access to water, it's one of the most fertile and therefore the most valuable strips of land in the area. So the Israelis guarded against the Arabs and the Palestinians. Because of the fact that Israel is such a volatile place, everybody is required to serve in the military, men and women. Men serve for 3 years, and women serve for 2 years, and they have to enlist once they turn 18. There are multiple famous sites in Israel. We're going to look at a few of them. So we're going to look at the Wailing Wall, the Shrine of the Book, Garden of Gethsemane, Sea of Galilee, and Bethlehem. So here you see is the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is the last wall standing of the temple, and Jews go there to pray. They lean their heads against the wall, and maybe you've seen the videos of them sort of rocking back and forth as they're praying, and they're wailing and they're weeping, so that's why it's called the Wailing Wall. Here we have the Shrine of the Book, which is important because it's where the Dead Sea Scrolls are housed. And we also have the Garden of Gethsemane, which we recognize as important because this is where Jesus prayed the night that he was betrayed. It's also the night that led to the crucifixion. We have the Sea of Galilee, which of course features in a lot of the Gospels, as far as the some of the there are storms, and it just featured largely in the Gospels. And then of course we have Bethlehem, and Bethlehem is lovely because this is where Jesus was born. And And all these locations, of course, are in Israel. So the capital of Israel is considered Jerusalem by the Jews, although the Arabs dispute this, and most foreign governments consider Tel Aviv to be the capital of Jerusalem. Except recently, because Donald Trump did something within during his presidency regarding Jerusalem. So if you want 5 extra credit points on your test, I want you to email me or have your mom email me your answer as to what Donald Trump did that changed the United States relationship with Israel and its capital city. Israel has some natural resources, but not very much. But when you compare it to its Arab neighbors, it has a wealth of prosperity in comparison. But Israel makes its money through tourism. We just looked at a few of the sites that people would go to see if they were visiting Israel. They would see Bethlehem, the Garden of Gethsemane, the Shrine of the Book, all those different places people would go to see. But Israel also has a good agricultural industry, and this has to do with its strong irrigation techniques. They're able to get water to where they need it. They cut diamonds. They also have other minerals because of the Dead Sea that they can sell, like phosphate. They also sell software, books, textiles, chemicals, and citrus fruits. One unique feature of Israel, particularly early Israel, post 1948, but it's not really a part of it today, is Kibbutsum. And Kibbutzum is basically where groups of people came together in little societies where they all volunteered and worked together for the good of the community. And this was important for the Jews initially when they were returning from the world and they were coming to Israel and they were returning as pioneers. It was a way for them to thrive in a hostile environment. It's not really, though, a part of Israel today, just highlighting that. Okay, so the last thing that you need to do for today is you're going to go to EdPuzzle and you're going to complete the EdPuzzle on Lebanon, and then you will be finished. Thank you. Bye.